there's this constant balance of your own success and your team success. And both of them, obviously, ideally are aligned, but it's hard to align them because I find it hard to align them anyway, because I can control what I do on a given day. I find it tough to pair them together. I think I can set my own personal goals easier than I can set team goals, because it doesn't feel right for me to be setting team goals in my private space, because I have less control over that.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of The Chase. Today's special guest, Ireland International winger, Andrew Conway. Andrew and I have a cool relationship. My second game ever with the USA was against Ireland, and I faced up against Andrew. From there, we connected, we stayed in touch, and I just absolutely love his mission, who he is as a person, his mindset around rugby, high performance, family. Everything about the guy is incredible. And today we're gonna hear a little bit more about his journey, his story, and behind the scenes into what it takes to be a professional and international rugby player. Stay tuned.
Дорога передо мной, бэби Хасани, плотным касанием подаваю строчку мозаика, пресс моих треков, надеюсь, не посадят мои карманы. Дрил бит, и плюс бетон,
All right, we are here with Andrew Conway. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Let's start with young Andrew, where you came from, what childhood was like, who were the influences on your life, and where this whole journey of yours originated.
Yeah, so I'm from Dublin. Went to school in a place called Blackrock with a friend of yours, I believe, Dylan Fawcett, who the butcher, yeah, quite a well-known figure over in America. Yeah, he tells me. So he kind of came a bit later. I think he came in when we were in first year, which is around 13 in Ireland. So I went to Blackrock when I was about 10 and was big into football, soccer, as you guys call it. And rugby was kind of, you play Saturday would be rugby, Sunday would be football or soccer, and we juggle them as you were going. Soccer was probably my first love, and what I was better at the time. And just as these things go, you're kind of working your way through young teenage years, and you're trying to pick something. And probably should, if I look back on it, I wish I'd actually stuck with both longer. You're kind of felt like I was pushed down to make a decision, which maybe in hindsight it would have been better to let it play out naturally, as opposed to being pushed into a decision when you're kind of 14. Pushed probably a bit over the top. It's more in terms of the time consumption. It was very tough to do both, so it would have been nice to maybe find a way to do both. So grew up and went to school in Blackrock, and my schooling, my standard of grades wasn't anything to write home about. So I was very, very fortunate that rugby was a potential career path after I left, and chased it, and thankfully after a few rough years it kind of came good. And probably 7-8 years ago it started taking off slowly but surely, and each year has kind of seemed to just kick on at levels and levels. And here we are today. I'm 31. Hopefully three kind of prime good years left. We got a World Cup coming up next year, which is very exciting, and I hope you guys are there. I'm not exactly sure what the future holds. That I'm in Ireland for the next year anyway, contractually. Hopefully go to World Cup. We have big plans from our side here. There's a lot of rugby to be played before then, and see what happens.
Man, that's incredible. But like growing up, I know you were playing soccer, you were playing rugby. Was being a professional rugby player in your sights, or what dream were you chasing?
Yeah, like I often get asked that, and I actually find it hard to almost put myself, in that same mental spot back. I was always really good, if like that's just without sounding overconfident, that's just a reality. I was always probably the best player on our team, or more often than not. So there was always that, like, professional rugby, particularly in Ireland, was starting to gain headway. Munster had won European Cups in 2006, which when I would have been 15. Leinster were, starting to become a force. So the pathway was starting to develop. Professionalism was 10 years old in Ireland. So there was people making good careers out of it. I kind of I must have, Christian. I must have really thought, like, you saw the results I got in school. In my leaving cert, you would have been damn sure that I was banking on rugby because they were pathetic. So I was lucky, but yeah, it's weird. Like I said, I can't remember going back there and going, this is going to be me. I'm like, no matter what, I'm going to make it. I could have, but it just doesn't jump out of my memory. Like, again, football was, something I probably, because when I was younger, football would have been, that would have been the dream. And that's, a lot of kids from this side of the world. The English Premiership is there, and anyone who's in any way decent wants to make it in football for the money, everything that comes with it. So that was probably something that, you know, rugby was probably my second sport. And then as I was getting towards that end of school time, I was like, yeah, I'm decent at it. And then kind of just hopefully the chips fall where they may. And, you know, I actually got in really early. That's probably something we touch on later on. In hindsight, I started playing professional rugby way too early. So I was 18, left school when I was 17, went straight into Leinster Academy. Within 6 months, was playing for the senior squad. So it's kind of just maybe 18 and a half, let's say. So mentally underdeveloped, never mind the physical underdevelopment as well, to understand what it takes to be a professional athlete. And unfortunately, fortunately at the time, but actually unfortunately in hindsight, I played 4 games in my first season when I was, you know, still in the academy, still a little pup, which went really well. And that then gave me a false sense of what it takes to kind of make your way through a professional life. I thought that what I was doing to that point, because the first few games went well, that's enough. And that's what's required. You know, I was always a decent enough trainer. I'd turn up, I'd train hard when I was there, I'd gym hard, whatever. But I never really thought of the game in a holistic sense, like you touched on before. And I never really, probably because I relied on talent growing up, I relied on my pace, I relied on my sidestep. The core skills that you need as a back three player in professional rugby are just, and it develops, doesn't it? Like it literally, probably since we've played together, or we played against each other, the core skills of a back three player based on where the game is going actually change almost season to season. It's mad, isn't it? It must be one of the only, or it must be of all the top sports in the world, it has to be up at the top of the way the game moves, the laws being changed, how teams are figuring things out and adapting, you know. So anyway, it took me a while to kind of find my own way in professional life. And I think it kind of came to a head, you know, one summer. I remember being away with my missus, and we were back on a flight on the way back. And I was a decent player, don't get me wrong. I was okay. What I wrote down was, I'm an average provincial player. That was what like my reflection was at the time, and which I stand by as a fair reflection. But I also knew that from years gone by that I was better than lads who are now on the lines towards playing for Ireland, starring for Ireland, even not just playing. So I was like, I definitely have it in me, but I need to reevaluate everything that I'm doing, and spend about 4 hours on a flight just stripping my whole process, my preparation, my performance back, and then putting plans in place to start chipping away at, like, okay, it's this going to be a slow burner. So I need to start making small gains and start then compounding them and then backing them up. And it's going to take time, but that's okay. I've got time. I was only 23 at the time, 22 maybe. And thankfully that it was a smart thing to do. And with a lot of work and, you know, a bit of patience and durability over the years, it started to show within maybe a year. It took about a year to show. And then I was like, right, I'm definitely onto something here, and kind of just stuck with that. And that's kind of been my mindset since. I'm not saying that I've certainly never been perfect, and I don't think I'll ever will be. There'll always be, sometimes you go a bit too far, another time you're a bit undercooked. It's a constant balancing act. But I think a really key point for me is always trying to adapt, and like almost every 6 months I want to do like a full review of what my last 6 months was, and see, okay, you know, I do a lot of journaling, so see within that writing, what was my attitude like? What was my, you know, small things like what were my gratitude levels like, you know, in the small moments? Is my writing negative or positive? Like, are small things bothering me? And it's funny because when you look back on things like that, they seem small, but they're a real good indicator of where I'm at. And then that will then be an even better indicator to where my performance level is at the time, you know, because you can see it based on dates, what games were being played at the time. It's really intriguing, and I love kind of talking about these things because I think there's so much to be gained from talking to other guys that are in the same boat.
No, that's incredible. And it's so on par with like all the athletes and people I brought onto the show. Is they talk about, you have to fall in love with the process and the journey. Because if you don't enjoy doing the little things day to day, well, then it just becomes a hassle. It becomes a job. So you really have to become obsessed with just the minute things. And it's even as simple as doing your prehab every day, you know, saying no to certain meals that, you know, aren't good for your body, and just showing up and doing the little things like gratitude journal and writing down and reflecting. But I think so often people are just always looking about the end result, and they don't take time to focus on the present, what's happening in those day-to-day moments.
100%. I think it's hard for guys that have never had to tap, or never felt like they needed to tap into it for whatever reason. I'm lucky because I needed to find a way to be better. So that came to me, you know, probably through various different like subconscious thoughts over a period of time, then it came to a head. Whereas, you know, when I talk to some people about it, they don't see the value in the small things. They're like, what do you mean great gratitude? What good is that going to do for me? Like, and I find it hard to kind of explain to people at times, you know, whenever they're coming from probably a cynical perspective on those little bits and pieces. You're saying those little things, like reading over the years was huge for me, you know, reading stuff about, there's a book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, and it's all about how the world governs itself. We won't go into the nitty gritties on it, but that's always one that stands out to me. It talks about karma, it talks about purpose. And when you dip your toe into that world, there's just so much to be learned, so much like knowledge on how things actually operate in the world, not just what we see on the surface, you know?
Absolutely. And the more I've gotten into my journaling and reading, is I've realized it's so much less about me and more about like the community I build and the friendships I make and what I can do for other people. It's putting so much more meaning to the life I live in the game that we play.
Yeah. How do you make people feel? How do you greet people? That's tough because, you know, when you're an athlete and you're pretty, for want of a better term, self-obsessed, because the best athletes are crazy driven to be the best. And for me, the best is when I retire, if any athlete retires, if they got the best out of themselves, no matter what level that is an absolute tick. Some of the guys that I've played with over the years haven't been, you know, they don't have 100 caps for Ireland, or weren't on any Irish Lions tours, but they got the best out of their careers. That's the most impressive thing as a fellow athlete, to see that this guy has found a way to what works for him, and he's driven and grinded his way to the absolute most that he could get out. That's kind of what I always think of, you know. That's always my kind of North Star.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I used to always compare myself to other people, and I'd set these benchmarks for myself, as in, I want to be the best player on my team, or I want to score the most tries, you know, those sorts of metrics. But then I realized half the time those are subjective, and whoever you ask, it could be me, it could be somebody else. It doesn't really matter. So then I changed my outlook on it. Can I just be the best Christian Dyer I can be? And can I do the little things every day? Because when this is all said and done, if I can look back on it and be proud of the effort that I put in, that's a win for me now. And it's just taken so much stress and pressure off of myself to look at these numbers and intangibles.
Yeah. And I'm with you 100% on, like, I call those affirmations that you were saying. I will, you know, be the top try scorer. I will be the best player. I love them, but it's very specific. So, and it'd be interesting. We can chat probably off camera on this a bit more and get your thoughts on it. But a big one for me going into the Rugby World Cup in 2019 was, and it came to me within, you know, like I do a bit of meditating on, and you're always trying to figure out, like, you don't want to do them just for the sake of doing something like that, because then you're wasting your own time. Yeah. But I will start at the Rugby World Cup was just something that made sense to me, because it meant that originally I was going to go, I will go to the Rugby World Cup, but I thought that then that was selling myself short, that just getting there as a win is like that doesn't sit right with me. Yep. Then I was like, I'll be the best player at the Rugby World Cup. And I was like, that also doesn't make sense to me, because that's subjective. So there's going to be multiple opinions on that. Each person's going to have someone different. If you're doing really well, you're going to have a few people thinking that, but again, didn't sit right with me. So I settled on I will start at the Rugby World Cup, and that felt right to me because it meant that I will be there. It also meant whenever I get the opportunity to play, because I'm there, I will start. And that's also slightly subjective, but less subjective than be the best player. And it felt right, you know, excuse me. And I wrote that down 10 times a night, every night of preseason, every training night. And what it made me do was, as much as it made me kind of believe that I would, it also made me accountable to what would someone who will start the World Cup do on a daily basis, from getting up in the morning, starting my day right throughout the day, train as hard as I can, recovering to the exact level that I know is possible, going to bed at the right times, you know. And then last thing before I was going to bed, write that down. And because it's the last thing before you go to bed, I'll have a complete the last 12 hours or whatever it is of what I've just done. So if I was to write that down and just be bluffing, I wouldn't actually be able to write it down. I would have given it up, because I'd be like, oh no, I would have found a way to not do it. Yep. And then first thing in the morning, the alarm goes off, you're earlier than you need to get up, and you're like, no, not this morning. I had a great day. Yes, I'll leave it off. That conversation starts happening. And then you go, fuck, last thing I wrote down last night was I will start the World Cup.
Yeah.
So up you get.
Absolutely. It's so true, because it's like when you start to envision the person that you want to become. And so for this chapter of your life, I want to start in the Rugby World Cup. So you're thinking about that Andrew Conway in the World Cup. You're already envisioning it. Then your behaviors, your routine, your habits, it's almost as if they just start aligning to that.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
It's the little things that you got to do every day that gets you there.
Yeah, 100%. It's the little things repeatedly done, turning up, like you said at the start of the conversation, just constantly turning up. It's not easy,
No, it's not.
I'm talking about a time where that was probably my peak of performance or preparation, which then led to peak of performance through the warm-ups into the World Cup. Again, I didn't get into the starting team for the World Cup quarterfinal against New Zealand. I probably should have, but that was out of my control. And then that continued on for the kind of first 6 months before we locked down, and my kind of performance that we're growing, match to match. It's a tough standard to stick with is the thing. And I kind of look at, so I'm injured now for the last while, I kind of look at them as blessings in a way, because I try and find the positive in situations, because people you meet in the street, I met someone there recently in the grocery store, and they're like, oh, it must be so bad when you're injured, when you're a professional player. It just must be so bad. And obviously take that on board and be like, oh yeah, it's shite, isn't it? Like, I'm missing this and I'm missing this and I'm missing this. And, oh, why am I injured for this? Whatever, you can find all them. But if you just try and find positives in it, we just had a little kid who's 6 months old today. So that's an easy one. Obviously, that's the easiest one I can come up with. But you can even sometimes, when I wasn't selected for Ireland matches, I'd be like, grand, that's fine, I'm not selected. That's actually good, because I can do more training, I can do gym, and I can be on the pitch longer whenever I'm not playing, so I can work on my skills better. And then I can do something on Sunday because I'll be rested. And I don't know where I figured that kind of flip of framing, I must have read it somewhere, or someone must have told me little bits and pieces along the way, but it just always made sense to me particularly in a professional context, I'm not talking about life here where tragedies happen and stuff. I'm talking about as an athlete, there's always something good that you can frame it always positively for yourself. And that's not being spoofy, everything's great, la da da. It just means that your mindset never, or it's harder for you to get down about stuff, because you get down about a non-selection or an injury, that can linger and that can feed into other parts of not just your performance or your kind of professionalism, but also your life,
Absolutely.
That's just not where you want to be going.
No. And the other, there's two things. Number one, you have to actively seek out the positive in those sorts of situations, which a lot of people, they're not looking for that. They're always looking at what's bad about this, the negative things. But the other thing about that, and it rings true to me so much. I'll tell you about my debut story, but it forces you to stay ready, because in a flip of a switch, something could change in life, or somebody could get injured in the starting lineup where Andrew's called up. But because you put in the work, because you kept training, you're probably in a better position to go do that job anyways, if it just spur of the moment type of thing.
Yeah. It's a great point. And I often talk to people who are trying to get into, say, a Munster team or an Irish team. And I've been there. I've been that person who's trying to get into teams and not been able to, not seeing a way in. And I always fall back on, whenever you get your opportunity, you have to take it. That doesn't mean just getting in there and doing okay. It means getting in there and trying to get into an Irish team. You got to be the best of you in that spot, because if I'm a coach and I'm looking at guys getting an opportunity, granted, take these kind of young guys who are, they're going to give a load of time to in the jersey because they see 10, 12 years in the jersey. That's kind of different. But, generally there's a lot of people competing for small amount of places. And I'm going to go with the guy who, whenever he makes a step up from, say, provincial to national, and he's the best version of himself, I'm going to go with that guy every time, because that means that he has the mental capacity to jump up the levels as he goes without needing loads of time to warm himself into it. It's a rootless world sport, what we're in, but that's just the way it is. There's always going to be a fella coming up behind you. There's always going to be someone who's ahead of you, who has money in the bank that if you don't play your best, they go, well, we got this guy who's got loads of experience. It's just a reality, whenever, like, I don't follow too many other sports, but I'm sure it's the same in all those sports, that when you get your opportunity, you got to take it. And that will give you a better chance to get your next opportunity. And you also got to take that. And if you start taking those first 2, 3, 4 games, whether it's a cap for your country or your first 5 or 6 matches in a club jersey or whatever, if you're like straight into it and there's always going to be room to get better. It doesn't mean you have to be the best you'll ever be, but to be as good in and around as good as you are then and there, and just to do it straight away, I think is a really good quality. And I don't really know how we got onto that exact point.
No, but it's funny. My debut story, I didn't make the Olympic team, so I was gutted, and that's for 7-8 months. That's all I was working towards. But then the team gets announced on a Friday night. Saturday morning, I get called up into the 15s national team. So I'm like, holy shit! One door closes, one door opens. All week, Coach Gold, and we're playing England the week we're before we were going to play you guys.
Okay,
said, you're not playing on Saturday. So I was like, damn, okay. I go through the whole week. I'm running England's plays, like all this stuff. We're in Surrey Sports Park where the Harlequins are, and I'm just enjoying the moment, but still pretty down that I'm not going to be able to get my debut. I do the non-23 conditioning on Friday, and about 85% of the way through, I mean, I'm already doing all these sorts of up downs, rucking drills, all this stuff. I'm gassed. S&C coach comes over. He goes, Christian, stop. You're playing tomorrow.
Oh, God.
And so I had like no time to think, but I was just so fortunate that I was in the peak performance of my life. Good headspace. I was just so grateful to be a part of it. Like there was no time to overthink. My body was ready. I trained all week, and then boom, I got my debut. But I'm just happy that all the prep was done before that. Little things that I compounded over months and years and seasons that got me to a point where I could go into that debut match against England confident in myself to play at that level.
Yeah, 100%. And what you said there was you're in a good headspace and you're grateful to be there. They're the 2 biggest points for me, There you get, like, once you got those, you're grateful. So even the fact you're saying you're down, but you're grateful to be there, you found something to be grateful about. And the world just works in funny ways, man, doesn't it? Like it does.
So crazy.
It really does. And like, the more you're open to letting those stuff, and like, we probably don't have time to go into all the manifesting and all that stuff, which, like, it's a crazy experience when you dive into that world and you actually put a few things in place and things start happening. You're like, is this actually real? It doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly gives you a better chance.
Yeah. Let's keep taking along. What does success look like to you?
Pretty much like I said, mate, it was like, if I get to the end of my career and I've achieved just obviously certain outcomes based on trophies, probably international caps, provincial caps, tries, I suppose, will be on them, but they're not that important to me. I promise you they're not. And maybe it's because I haven't won that many trophies that they're not. But they always hear Johnny Sexton talking about all he cares about is trophies because people can't take it away from him. So everyone's experiences are different. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't won that many trophies. So I kind of don't feel that same way. Maybe that's just personality thing. It's like, if I can get, when I look back after and be like, I got the most out of myself over a long period of time, I think that's an important one too. If possible, that's less important, but I think it will make it a bit sweeter, because to do it over a long period of time takes a whole lot of work. It takes a whole lot of turning up. It takes a whole lot of setbacks to come back from. So those are the 2 things that would stand out to me. And tell you go through peaks and troughs with it. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to need the best version of myself for the next 5 years. And then, you have a bad week and your rehabbing isn't going great. You're like, oh, Jesus, have I ran my race? And they're obviously fairly extreme positions to take, but that's just a battle of being a professional athlete. And it's just almost getting to love that a bit in a way, and being okay with that. And both those 2 extremes pass, you end up kind of living in a more even keeled space. The longevity thing and just getting the best out of myself, fulfilling my potential are 2 kind of key things for me.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I want everybody to hear that. Now, I think there's honestly 2 types of people in this world. There's those that are driven by success, and there's those that are driven by the fear of failure. Where do you see yourself on that spectrum?
It's a very good question.
It's honestly it's both. Like,
yeah, like, and I don't even know if I'm either, because I'm like, in a way, I'm like pretty, I suppose, like self-driven for, it's like personal. It goes with team sport. There's this constant balance of your own success and your team success, and both of them obviously, ideally are aligned, but it's hard to align them, because I find it hard to align them anyway, because I can control what I do on a given day. I find it tough to pair them together. I think I can set my own personal goals easier than I can set team goals, because it doesn't feel right for me to be setting team goals in my private space, because I've less control over that. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like I'm spoofing that a bit just to do it for the sake of doing it. That would always stop me. If I feel like I'm doing something for the sake of it, I'll stop. That's just the wrong path to go down. So yeah, I don't actually have a definitive answer for you, which is fine, because I don't want to give you. I don't want to just give you a spoof to kind of to hit the answer.
Man, you've been around a lot of teams, and you've been around a lot of successful teams, and then you've been a lot where seasons are just going average. But what really separates the good teams from the great teams?
Everything, every little detail is the answer. It's knowing things aren't going to be perfect, feeling around you that, you've got people all pushing in one direction. I suppose that's probably the biggest thing. Aligned, everyone believing in what we're doing. That's easy to say, but that's very, very, very rare. It really is very rare. The coaches, the players, the staff, everyone being on the same page and rowing in the same direction is rarer than people would believe, because to do that from the top down, the systems and the environment and the communication and the people all have to be right. That's 4 things I just named that have to be spot on. And very, very lucky, the national setup at the moment for us, Andy Farrell, is, in my opinion, and I've said this 2 years ago, whenever he was under the pump, after we lost England. People were just saying, people in rugby, and on all media, they have short memories. He was under the pump anyway, and I'd been exposed to him as an assistant coach, as a defence coach, and then I'd seen him for the first couple of months. This is just before COVID made us lock down. I was shocked about how good he was, and that is from all the things I named: the communication, the environment, how happy people were, and how he treated people on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, the rugby side of it, the skills, the game plan, the picking the right people, the everything to do with the rugby. And then just this emotional intelligence to understand what messaging to give us at what times, what buttons to press, when to press them. It was, I've never seen anything like it. So I do maintain, or I definitely foresee, if you look 10 years down the line, I think he's going to be one of the greats. And I'm very, very, very lucky that I've had he's my current national coach. He stands out probably at the top. Don't know. Yeah, definitely at the top. I've had Joe Schmidt. I've had Rassi Erasmus, who's obviously gone off to win a World Cup.
Yep.
I've had properly class coaches, and they're all different as well, which is the funny thing. A lot of them, all 3 of those are, very, very, very different. And they've all had massive, massive success in different ways, So there's definitely loads of ways to do it. And I suppose, without putting my coaching hat on, I can only probably speak from a player's perspective, is that they have to get the feel for what group they're working with, and then base their plans off that. Is it a young team? Is it an experienced team? How do we bring people through and, mesh that all together? It's an next to impossible job, because there's so many balls in the court to get them right. And to go back to what your question was, everything is the difference. That's on a daily basis. That's what people are doing in the mornings. That's what people are eating. And because I've been in both, obviously, teams that have, underperformed, and I've been in teams that have performed to their peak, you can feel it when you're in there. You can feel it. And there's almost it's hard to explain with that. Like I can name a few bits and pieces, but there's a feeling as well that we're doing things right. That is pretty special.
Wow. Okay. So keep going on that best, the best team here. When you guys suffer a loss, what's the protocol like, dissecting that loss, moving on, but also trying to take the takeaways away from the game where you guys weren't at your best? What's that like leading into the next game? Because the best teams are able to put it behind them and focus on the next job.
Yeah. So fortunately, we haven't lost that much under, say, Faz, particularly. Like, I'll use this example because it's a really good one. We lost to France in Six Nations. First meeting of the week is usually, sometimes we kind of be out in this artificial track. It's kind of indoor, excuse me. Another time we'd be up in the classroom, sitting normally, you know, the screen up here, us all there. This time we walked in, it's just a big circle, and we're like, okay, interesting. And he addressed us first, and he says, like, right, lads, you know, obviously we had a tough week, and then he'll break us into groups. He'll give us a few questions, whatever, you know, like, what did we think went wrong? Let's just say that. And we'll break into 6 groups, and he wants to see then, when we come back to share all the information, are we aligned before he says anything on are all 6 groups aligned, or is there common themes within that? So 1, you're hopeful that there is, and then 2, yeah, exactly. If you're not, then you're in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, there's a bigger issue.
Exactly. And then 2, talking about having and the point of the circle, without Faz ever telling me this, I think it's just to be open, and like, he always makes it clear, the only wrong thing to say is not saying it and saying it after. We have this, you know, really open, safe space, which is also tough and honest as well. So it's not a spoofy space where it's nicey nice to each other. It's people are comfortable because they know if they have something to say, that not everyone's going to agree with it just to be nice, but you have to say it. If you're caught chatting shit out in the corridor after about it and you didn't voice your opinion, that's the worst thing you can do. Chatting really is the thing, you know. There's going to be some people who agree on some points, and there's going to be some people agreeing on others. I remember there was I think we didn't take our points at a time whenever, you know, arguably we could have. And I didn't really know what the right option was. It was a tricky one. And Faz said something like, all right, they're both right options. And I didn't really understand what he meant, but I do now. It's only a right option based on what happens on the other side of it. You know, like, there's reasons for going to the corner. There's reasons for taking the points. You kick your points and you miss, or you get them, or you go to the corner and you score, or you don't. They're only the right option. One, you take what you're trying to do, either score in the corner or score over the post. And 2, the rest of the game, the context of where it finishes, is going to make that a right or wrong option. So anyway, that was just a small example from the French match. But you walk out of those meetings, that's it, whatever, Saturday game, 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, you walk out of those meetings fully understanding what went wrong, having an open forum to discuss it. And that's about, like, both the physical and the mental side. How are people feeling? They scored against us in the first kind of 2 minutes. And he asked, like, and the sports psychologist Gary Keegan was, what did you feel? And I don't know if you've played in a few games where you're behind the post after a minute or 90 seconds, particularly in a big match where there's 80,000 people at it. You're like, oh shit. Yeah. All your best laid plans, you're pumped up, you've done the anthems, you're ready to get stuck in, and you're behind the post in 90 seconds, and the French supporters are going insane. It's really, really tough if you haven't planned for something like that to not feel that. You start thinking, oh, well, if they scored, how easy was that? What's the rest of this game going to look like? It affects your psyche. But if you plan for those things, and not plan to concede, but plan to go, what happens if, you know, call it a punch in the face, use that example. What happens if you get punched in the face early in a fight? You got to be ready for it. You got to feel that, like, that we're not planning for that to happen, but if that does happen, we're going to do this, and we're going to simplify this, and we're going to come in, we're going to take 2 breaths, we're all going to come together. We're like, all right, grand lads, we made a mistake, there's a system error, there's a missed tackle, whatever. That's fine. Someone put their hand up and go, I should have made that tackle, you know, and that then makes the other 14 guys go, oh great, at least it was only Andrew missed a tackle, that it wasn't something that we all did, you know what I mean? And that then frees people up. So they're the best. That's the best way I've seen to do it, because, you know, it just puts everything out there. It gives you real good, clear communication that we all are aligned, and then you move on. I think the biggest thing is just moving on, not being stuck. And it works both ways, doesn't it? Not being stuck in a loss, more so not being stuck on the great win you had. That's hard as well. You've had a great game and people are tapping you in the back, you scored a few tries, you start feeling great about yourself. That's a tough space to be in, or it's a dangerous space to be in, I should say.
Absolutely. And it comes with just a bit of like emotional maturity. You make a mistake. Hey, I got it. If I can see my teammate own it, I'm like, boom, he's still mentally in it. He's not going to allow that bad pass, that whatever, to influence the rest of the game.
Yeah, 100%.
So we'll talk a little bit about you and your prep. How important is it for you to make your strengths world-class, versus working on your weaknesses? So like, where do you find the balance between that?
Yeah, it's a tough balance to crack. I suppose the way I'd be looking at it now is, where can I be most efficient? So like, where can I put my work that's going to give me the most bang for my buck? So like, strip it back down to, like we talked about at the start of the chat, back three player. What's important for us at the moment? Owning the air is a big thing. If you can dominate the air on both sides of the ball, you're in a really good spot. You need really good footwork. You obviously need pace, which is, not something that you're going to be able to work too much on after or before session, because your body needs to be relatively looked after within that like pretty high level of work that you're going to be doing anyway. Kicking is a massive, massive thing for me. The way the game's gone, particularly with the 50-22s now, and the fact that the touching the ball down in the goal line is now a goal line dropout as opposed to a 22, means that kicking from the edge there's now more wiggle room to kick the ball into the goal line. You've saved yourself 22 meters there, the 50-22s, and because of the 50-22s, that will mean that there's likely two people back there, and they'll be guarding those 22s. So the short kicking game should be that should be on more now. And then say tackle tech is a huge one, like tackle selection. But the other ones, probably from an attack perspective, are my go-tos. And you don't need to put that much time and effort in, you don't need to put that much effort into it. By, I don't mean if me and you are standing 40 yards away from there, just punting the ball to each other, punting the ball now for 15 minutes. To me, that's a waste of my time. Why am I doing that? I'd much rather for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, be walking down the side of the pitch and just practicing putting the ball from my right hand to my left foot, and like it literally trickling a yard or two, and then picking it up and putting left hand I drop my right hand to right foot, which is, a bit trickier to run with, but that's my more dominant side. And the bang for your buck based on breaking a skill down to that bare minimum means that whenever I'm at full flight, my body and my mind connection will remember all the reps that I do of the really finer, the breakdown of it, as opposed to, it's not going to remember a fuck if I've punted the ball for 40 times over 40 yards for, 15 minutes after every session. It's doing nothing for me. And the same type of ball, getting a ball and just throwing it up in the air and just catching it and changing where making sure that your hands are in the right place, making sure your hands are as hard as they can, your elbows are tight, those, as opposed to say standing there with a scrum half who kicks me 20 box kicks, and I'm kind of just like, me and you were there chatting away, you go up, you catch it. Whenever you talk about like the brain body connection, that's potentially making you worse if you're not fully tuned into that. But if you figure out a couple of small ways to break down a skill to the lowest level, and I know, like you said, you've done a few guys, the UFC. Henry Cejudo was interviewed by, might have been Joe Rogan, and he was talking about his training, and he said he does some stuff at 100 miles an hour. Some of his stuff, sparring, is a fight. They do a walkout, they do a square off, etc., etc. And this rang true to me for what we were saying. He said, but some of my stuff is like a 1 out of 10 in terms of how I practice it. And that's kind of what I mean, it's breaking things down to the very finest, slowest, and then building it up. And yes, I'm telling you see benefit from it. You really do. But it almost takes a bit of discipline to do that way, because it's not really the norm. And I've heard just different stories of Dan Carter. All he did after training, well, not all he did, but probably a lot of what he did was just running at a post and just throwing a square pass and like making sure he didn't hit the post, he stayed on the inside of it, and just repeating that. Why would he do that? Because he wants to keep defenders square and he wants to stick defenders. So to do that, you make it as simple as you can and just make your body do that over and over and over again. And then when it comes to go time, you'll do it. It doesn't sound like rocket science, but it's probably less common, I suppose, than it should be, that we all kind of want to do more, and we want to find a new drill, or we want to, make it more complex. It just needs to be thought about and then executed and then repeated. You'll slowly but surely, and then once you start seeing gains and you start doing it in training, then you start doing it in a match, and then it's part of your armory.
Wow, if I heard that right, it's almost becoming world class at the basics, but then pairing that or coupling that with drills that are game like, situational. So you're getting high intense competitive reps, but you're nailing the fundamentals. So it's all about efficiency and just doing stuff that's actually going to transition into the game.
Yeah, exactly. And so for rugby, right, for your position is doing efficiency is the word that always sticks out. Doing what is most efficient for you to be the best players you can be. And that's going to change. This conversation, hopefully, if we have another one in a year, I should be talking about something a bit different. I shouldn't be stuck on the same points because I'll need to be moving on. But it's about thinking about what's important and then being ruthless with the execution of that over and over and over again, and then over and over and over again, and then thinking, am I still on the right track here? Should I change it? Thinking about it, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, and then always checking in yourself every 2 months or something within this, talking to a coach, talking to your peers in that position, see what they're doing. Could you add something in? Could you take something away? It's constant. It's nothing completely set in stone, but generally having a pretty particular way you do things.
Absolutely. Well, I know I don't want to hold up, your night too much. So I just got a few quick questions we can get into. Describe yourself in 3 words.
A bit weird.
A bit weird. Unreal. Oh, I love the honesty. Okay, who inspired you?
Inspired me. Muhammad Ali.
Amazing. Greatest life advice.
Be grateful for what you have and you'll get more of it.
Love it. What's your biggest fear?
Not being who I say I am.
Last thing, if you could share some words to somebody who's just now starting chasing their dream, what would you tell them?
You have to give it everything or you're not going to get what you want out of it.
Wow, guys. I mean, I really, really enjoyed that conversation. And for me, it resonates so much with me because I'm a rugby player just like Andrew. And so there's so many similarities that I draw to. But I think that even though if you're not an athlete, you can still take so much away from that conversation, especially his piece on searching and seeking the positives with setbacks. Andrew's going through a knee rehab right now, but he's finding things that he can be grateful for. He's rooting his happiness, his joy in things outside of just the situation. And so many people in life are going through tough times because that's a part of life. But I think if you wake up each day with that outlook and that mindset and that intent to go find what is good in my situation, it'll change everything. And so that is what I'm so grateful to have, Andrew share on his journey, because I think it can touch so many lives. And so stay involved with the show, stay involved with the chase. We're going to keep bringing on people like Andrew. We're going to share these incredible stories. We're also going to dive into how it's not always sunshine and rainbows, especially for the people that it may look like it. That's the reality of it. And so we're going to bring on more people. Stay tuned, guys.